Hello and welcome back to my storytelling channel. Today I'm here to share the final chapter of Eternally Mine. I hope that you have enjoyed this story as much as I have enjoyed writing it. Let me know what you think in the comments.
Maybe I'm a bird following the seasons. This is what I've learned. I'm different for a reason. Kept the engine on, never stay too long. I'm alright, I don't mind being restless. Something in your eye made me stay all night. I can see you are different too. Love me like a stranger.
The anger struck me like a fist without warning, and I got up, walking around him as he reached for my wrist and pulled me toward him. I could see the pain in his eyes, his jaws working, and the grip he had on me was enough to tell me what was pounding inside him. When I tried to pull away from him, he held on to me and didn't let go. "If you don't release me, I will scream," I warned. I watched as Boa's eyes filled with tears, and he slowly let me go. He stepped away from me, and I saw his shoulders sag as he ran a hand through his hair. "I've done all I can, Mai Thao. I don't know what else to do to make you happy. If you're this unsatisfied with me, just by protecting you, then leave. Walk out of here, right now, and I promise I won't stop you." His words shocked me. "Are you kicking me out? Isn't that what you want? You think only of yourself, Mai Thao. You see only your pain, and you can't even open your eyes to look at me. Yes, it wasn't my body that bled, but my heart is as much broken as yours, perhaps even more. My healing hands can save everyone out there when called upon, yet when I tried to cross the threshold to save my own child, I was blocked and asked to return home. Do you know what it's like for me to watch as my daughter returned to the heavens, and I just stood there, watching. I couldn't even do anything, and when she turned to look at me and smiled, he broke down. I just about died. Do you know what that is like?" I felt my throat closed up, and I reached out to touch him, but he moved away. The gesture made me pull away and sink into a hole. How can we heal together, Boa, when we were never meant to be together from the start? Maybe this is a sign for us to part ways. You mean this is a sign for you to earn the right to walk away? I shrugged and felt tears slip down my cheeks. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said. "I want nothing from you." As he said this, he walked toward me and he gave me a defeated look. "I want only the best for you, and if that includes a life without me, so be it. Go ahead, Mai Thao. Today I'm giving you permission to walk out of my life. Find the man you truly love and want so that when you sleep at night, you can rest peacefully instead of having me to fight to make you stay." He walked out of the room and I crumbled to the floor. What had gotten into me? The pain of losing our child was still fresh, and yet here I stood apart from my own husband, fighting an even bigger battle, and I knew I would lose this one too. I stood and walked to where the strings lay on the ground. I picked them up and held them in my hands as I crawled into the bed. I lay there, and I heard him tell his mother to go to sleep. He made up a lie after lie to prevent them from knowing we'd fought, but I knew his mother well. She already knew the truth. Tears filled my eyes, and I muffled my cry until I could sleep.
"Come in."
I turned and found him swimming in the water, a shining beacon of light as the sun cast over him. He reached out a hand and smiled at me as I walked closer to the edge of the water. My feet were about to touch it, and as I watched him, a smile appeared again, this time more gentle than ever before. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the water and felt it swim around my legs, holding me, hugging my body. His grin widened, and I took his hand as he pulled me toward him.
"Finally, you are here to be with me. I've always told you that you belong with me. I can take you to your daughter. I can reunite you both. All you have to do is say so.
I put my hands on his chest and realized he had no heartbeat. He must have noticed because he laughed and then took my hands together. I watched as his eyes turned different shades before me. He truly was so handsome and filled with such a seduction that I wanted nothing more than to lay with him forever. But his smile disappeared suddenly, and he shoved me back with such force I landed on the shore. He growled and slammed his hands against the wave, causing it to flood the land. He stood, growing taller and taller, until he towered above me.
You despicable mortal,
he cried.
How dare you trick me?
What? I asked as I stood on shaking legs. I watched as the strings I tore off floated to the top of the water, turning it black, and the strings began to shine. He screamed and thrashed about as the strings shined brighter and brighter, and to my horror the strings lengthened and latched onto his tail, cutting off circulation, and in one instant his tail snapped off. He howled, and green blood filled the waters as he looked up at me with hooded eyes.
You dare to hurt me, after I have only loved you?
He asked. I shook my head and replied, You never loved me. Laughing, he replied,
You think you have won, haven't you? Do you know what happens to shamans who lose their will to fight? They go into a place where even the best masters can't bring them back. Your dear husband, thanks to you, is now living in a world where he has little memory of you. You have successfully cut him out of your life, and he now will never remember you.
Pain shot through my heart as I stumbled backward. What are you talking about? Laughing, blood gurgled out of his lips as he sank to the ground like a deflated balloon.
Good luck, bride. I'm getting your groom back.
I jerked awake, alone, and the strings I'd torn off were inside the palm of my hand. I could smell the rice from outside of the curtain, and I dressed before walking out to find my mother-in-law cooking. She looked up at me, and she gave me a weak smile. My father-in-law was sitting in the corner of the room smoking his pipe with one leg on top of the other. Mama, where is Boa? I asked. He went hunting. He said we were low on food and left early this morning. Didn't you know? He said he told you already. I blushed and tried to recover with, Oh, yeah, I forgot. I walked back into the bedroom and thought about the dream I'd had. Was it true? I took the strings and stuffed them into the waistband of my pants. I would wait until he returned, and I would apologize to make things right again. He never came back home that day. Instead, a little boy came to our home and said Bua had told him to tell us he was spending the night at the garden house. My mother-in-law nodded silently, and she gave me a look to guilt me. I knew she'd heard us last night, and I couldn't hide it anymore. I felt the tears prick my eyes, and the words we exchanged clouded my head. Yeah, my son is a type that when he loves someone, he loves them forever. But if his heart is broken, he will never look at that person the same way again. Do you honestly think that you can keep hurting him, and he will just forgive you over and over? My mother-in-law asked. I lowered my face to the ground. I was angry. I was just so tired of everything going on. And yet this is what it has come down to. When you are broken and unsafe in spiritual terms, he can save you. But how will you save him? You can't collect his soul from dark places. What will you do? I felt the tears roll down my cheeks, and I had no answer for her. I knew she was right. I was wrong to have only seen my pain and not his. That night, I dreamt of a dark house covered with a broken roof where it leaked, and there was no life inside. Yet as I walked closer, I realized Bua was sitting in the front of the porch weaving a broken basket. I rushed to him and reached out to hold his hand. He gave me a bleak stare and pulled his hand away from me. Greetings. What honor do I owe this visit? He asked. I felt my throat go dry as I reached for his hands again. This time he stepped up and moved away from me. Bua, I cried out. Bua, it's me, your wife, Mai Thao. He looked at me sideways and shook his head. No, you're not my wife. My wife is inside my house. and I appreciate it if you would not come to make problems. Go home." "Bua!" I called out as he turned into the house and closed the door. I ran to the door and knocked it open. There, he stood with a dying fire and an empty house with vines growing openly everywhere. "Bua, come home with me." "No, I live here. You are the one to leave." And then I remembered the demon's warning to me about how he would lose the memories of me once his spirit was taken to a place of darkness. I watched as Bua moved about in a home where his eyes saw happiness. I ran to him, but something held me back, shoving me out of the house, and the impact woke me up from the dream. I was once again alone in bed. I got up and pushed the curtain aside, walking out the front door, and I saw the image of Bua rushing past me to the backyard. I chased after him and threw my arms around him, my voice calling for him as I felt the love explode inside of me. "Where have you been?" I asked. "You had me so worried." "Nya," the voice of my father-in-law shocked me, and I pulled away as he turned around to look at me. "Nya, it's me, not Bua." I blushed as I stepped away. "Father, I'm sorry. I thought you were Bua." "No, he's at the garden house." I turned and started running toward the path where it would lead me to him. The sky began to darken, and the clouds rolled around like little lions playing in the dirt. The sound of thunder clashed above me, and the first drop of rain hit my head as I began to run. The path to the garden house was full of terrains of slopes, and I fell twice, picking myself back up with exhaustion. The rain made the soil loosen, and it was hard to run as I felt the chill over me. By the time I reached the garden shed, it was pouring in sheets, and I saw Bua sitting there, his back turned to me, looking at the rain. "Bua!" I cried. He turned around, and I ran to him with all of my heart. He stood, and I collided with him as I let out a gut-wrenching cry. "Bua!" "What's going on?" he asked. I pulled away and looked at him. "I'm so sorry. I love you. I love you. I never want to hurt you again. I'm so sorry about everything. You are right. I was selfish, and I saw only myself. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Come home and be my light again. I need you." I broke down into tears. "I need you, Bua. Everything in my life is better with you. Please, don't leave me. I love you. Stay with me. Choose me." His eyes filled with tears as he touched my face gently and pulled me to hug. "Silly wife, what are you talking about? I'd never leave you." "I had a dream of him again. He told me that your spirit is sick, and you would never remember me because I hurt you. It's my fault. I have failed as your wife." He pushed me away, and a smile appeared on his face. "Darling wife, I am not going anywhere." "I had a dream of you where you didn't remember me, and no matter how much I called out to you, you didn't want me." Bua smiled and touched my nose. "Nonsense. You are mine, Mai Thao. I could never leave you." And then he bent down and lifted my pant leg up, showing the red string on my ankle. "While you slept last night, I already tied you to me." I looked down, shocked that I had missed it. "You did?" He stood up and I hugged him. "Bua, I love you." "And I love you, my darling wife." Thunder clashed around me and I jerked awake, in my bed and alone. I rushed out and found my mother-in-law sitting at a guest bed with Bua sleeping soundly, his face paled, and I realized everything I had seen was just a dream. She looked at me with a hatred that burned. "You've managed to give my son nothing to want to live for. He saved you so many times. How will you save him now when he doesn't want to return to a place where he's no longer loved?"
Maybe I'm a bird, following the seasons. This is what I've learned. I'm different for a reason. Kept the engine on, never stayed too long. I'm alright, I don't mind being restless. Something in your eyes.
I missed Bua. I missed the Bua that was always beside me, wanting me, protecting me, watching, guiding, shielding. I missed him. He had been bedridden for 2 days, eating only congee, and allowing only his mother to feed him. I'd been confined to the bedroom where I was reflecting on my choices, and I'd been drowning in tears. I knew that what I had done and the dreams I'd been having were finding him in broken places that wasn't his home. That meant something more than what I thought. No matter how much I called out to him, he wouldn't listen to me. He always gave me that strange, confused gaze that ate my entire soul. How do I reach him? The demon's last words haunted me, and I hadn't dreamt of him since, but a part of me wanted to so I could strike a deal with him. Give me my boy back and I would go with him willingly. I would do that because I now knew how much I truly loved him. But it came at a time where I had already lost him spiritually. I heard his mother conversing with him, and I took a shot of his, lifting the curtain to walk out. My mother-in-law looked over at me and didn't greet me as she stood to clean the dishes from breakfast. Bo's face was a pale complexion with little energy attached to him. I walked to him, and as I reached out a hand, he moved his slightly to avoid touching mine. Tears filled my eyes, and I sat down on the edge of the bed, only to find him moving his leg away from me. "Do you hate me that much?" I whispered. "No, I am giving you exactly what you wanted." "I don't want this," I cried. "I never wanted this." He turned to look at me and gave me an empty smile. "Isn't it? I guess I'm not man enough to ever be the one you seek in life or in dreams." He lowered his face, and a tear slipped down his cheek. "Do you know what hurts me the most, Mai Thao? To know that even when I am inside you, giving you the most intimate part of me, you still never felt that connection with me, and after I have lain with you, you close your eyes to only dream of someone else. I tried to fight him, to win you, and yet you keep going back to him. What has he given you? Nothing but empty promises and a haunting that has come between us. Why are you blaming me so hard? I lost my child. And I didn't?" he asked with a cold stare. "You think I'm not allowed to mourn just because it wasn't my womb the child laid in? You think you're the only victim in here because our daughter bled out of you?" He laughed and shook his head. "Mai Thao, I have been to so many healing rituals where I went to bring back the soul of a woman who had lost her child. Every step of the way, I could count exactly how many steps it took to reach the place I needed to go and how many steps it took to come back home." And then he broke down and began crying. "Do you know that when it was my own child, I couldn't even begin to count how long it would take to reach her? You felt her in your womb. You felt her when she exited out of your body. But do you know what I felt? I felt surrender when I had to watch her smile at me and ask me to return home without her. I felt complete guilt when the world she would return to had no place for me. I felt failure when I had to come back and tell you I couldn't do anything." I burst out crying as I reached over and hugged him. "Boa, don't wander off to a place I can't reach you. I need you here. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I know now what I have done, and I'm willing to do everything and anything to have you with me." I pulled away. "Yes, you were right. I drove you away. I loved you, but not enough. I gave you my heart, but not in spirit. It was a verbal consent to make the world turn. I love you, but it wasn't enough to make you stay with me before. But now, I have seen the world in a different light, and I don't want anyone else but you." Boa gave me a faint smile and brushed my hand off of him. "I'm tired. Let me sleep. We can talk more when I wake. I'll wait right here for you. Do what pleases you, Mai Thao." "Do you feel remorse?" I turned around to face my mother-in-law walking in as she pulled a small stool to sit. I turned to find Bo's eyes had closed, and I walked over to sit beside her. "Mama, I'm sorry." She laughed. "You're sorry? What do you plan to do if you're that sorry? Tell me what to do. I'll find any shaman to bring him back. Tell me, Mama." She looked at me with sad eyes. "Nya, you don't understand, do you? It's not about the strongest shaman in the world bringing him back. It's about him wanting to return himself. If he doesn't want to continue, his soul spirit will leave his body and all you will see is him continuing to get weaker by the day. You think men don't suffer the wrath of loss? You think just because they wear the pants in the family they must hide their emotions? Men are harder to bring back than women, you know. They wander and they wander far away because home no longer has the essence of love for them to return. How can I make him see that I love him? How can I prove that I love him so he'll return? Beg, plead, and make him remember you. I'm not a shaman, Mama. I can't do all of that. She reached over and touched my cheek. He's sleeping now. Go and hold his hand. Speak to him, and let your voice travel in his dreams to reach him. I turned to where Bua lay sleeping, and I walked over, climbing into the bed with him. I laid my head on his shoulder and placed my hand on his chest. I listened to the sound of his breathing as his chest moved up and down. When he moved his hand to brush me off, I grabbed his hand and held tightly. No matter what you do, I'm not letting you go, I whispered. Bua, listen to my voice. Listen to me and remember. Remember me. You're Mai Thao, your bride. You're only one. His hand softened, and I shut my eyes, bringing my body to his together. I found him, pacing back and forth in an overgrown garden with chickens that were lying feet up, dead and rotten, the smell of decay spiring all around us. Bua was wearing a torn shirt, and his finger-combed hair looked greasy as he stood there, pacing. When he saw me, he stopped and stared at me for a split second before he continued again. Bua, what are you doing? I asked. I'm waiting for my wife and daughter. They told me to wait here for them. Who is your wife and daughter? A smile broke across his face, but then he stopped pacing and looked up at me. You know, I don't know. Do you know? I reached out a hand to him. I do. Will you come with me? I'll show you where you belong. Do you trust me? He shook his head. No. Then the sound of bells in the distance began ringing with the wind. He looked around and asked, What is that sound? That is your mother calling you home. Do you hear her voice? Listen. Bua, my son, return home where you belong. Come home. We await you gently and fiercely, his mother's voice whispered. Why am I here? He asked. My eyes filled with tears. You're here because I hurt you. He gave me a cold stare and I dropped to my knees. Bua, I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I didn't see your pain. I'm so sorry. Come with me where you belong. We will make a life together, have babies, and live until our hair grows white. When you can no longer see, I'll be your eyes. And when I can no longer hear, you can be my ears. Come home with me. Bua started to shake. Why does all this seem so familiar? I began crawling toward him on my knees. Bua, we'd lost a child, our daughter, but we didn't know how to heal together. Instead, we grew apart and it was my fault. Look at me, look at me. I am your bride, your home, your peace. Do you remember what you promised me? Do you remember? He reached up and touched his head, his eyes shutting, pain escalating through him. I can't remember anything. All I can see is a white light and the sound of a little girl's voice calling me, Daddy. I let out a sob and I reached out and touched his face. Bua, our daughter died. She died and has returned home. But I need you to return home with me. She will one day come back to us again. Search inside your heart. Remember what you promised me. Then his eyes filled with tears and he whispered, You are mine. No one takes what is mine. No one touches what is mine. And no one will ever claim what is mine. From the ends of the earth, I will walk to claim you, and to the edge of the heaven, I will travel to bring you home. You are mine. A smile broke across my face as I shut my eyes and began to cry. The sky began to darken, and I looked up as the first drop of rain landed on my cheek. Lights began to shine through the clouds, and the rays lingered across Bua's body as he watched it play across his skin. He lifted his face up, and an amber horse broke through the darkness of the clouds. The sound of neighing collided with the cry of thunder, and the horse landed. 1,000 warriors of lights began falling down to the earth. Each one of them carried a sword on their back, their long white hair to their waist, and the shimmery outfits they wore glowed among the darkness of the earth. They fell to their knees, their hands up in a prayer mode, and Bua began to shake. I watched as his hands curled into a fist, and then with a mournful cry he fell to the ground and began to pound the earth, fist after fist, until his knuckles were bloody. And then he let out a blood-curdling scream as he raised his hands in the air, and the old outfit he had on ripped from his body, and a burst of light exploded. I shielded myself as I fell over, and the sound of an ancient chant began to sing over the loudness of the raindrops. I recognized it. It was Boaz chanting. I turned swiftly to find him dressed in a white outfit, his face a color of life, and one of the warriors got up and slipped a red veil over his head. The darkness of the world around us began to fade, and with it a light entered, as Boaz came to me, bent down, and picked me up in his arms. With one swift move, we shot through the sky and landed in a meadow of white flowers that danced across the wind. He let me go, and I stood on shaking legs as he raised his hand into the sky, and then he shifted the veil up and dropped to his knees. Spiritual guides, bring me home. Pave the path for me to see. Grief clouded me, and I have lost my way. Bring me home, he whispered. I watched as my husband, a big and strong man, sat on his knees, and the sky opened up, shining a light down. The path before us broke into a portal, and a red gravel road appeared before us.
Daddy? Mommy?
The two of us turned as a little girl the age of 4 appeared before us. She had Boaz's eyes and my smile as she stood there wearing a white dress that blew in the wind. My heart capsized, and I let out a sob as Boaz stood with tears streaming down his face. She smiled at us and took a few steps toward us.
Go home, Mommy and Daddy. I promise I will come back to you again. I promise I will come back to you again. Go home. I will return when the heavens have fixed me well enough to survive.
Are you? I asked as my voice croaked. Are you mine? She smiled, and her little eyes beamed with tears.
I'm always yours, Mommy. I choose to always be yours and Daddy's, just as you both would choose each other again in each lifetime.
She walked to me, her little arms outstretched, and she took each of our hands.
If you don't fight this battle and win, I can't return. Mommy, Daddy, fight for me. I want to be in your arms, Daddy. I want to be by your side, Mommy. Fight for me.
The sound of the bells ringing alerted Boaz, and he pulled his veil down, already singing a song as he let the hand of our daughter go. But I began crying, and as she started to back away from me, I took a step to follow her. Boaz stopped me and yanked me back as I watched our little girl walk up the hill and disappear into a cloud. I wailed, and all around me I saw dark forms of energies begin to rise. Don't cry, my bride. Others will hear you. Do you trust me? Boaz asked. I turned to face his red veil, and I took his hand. I trust you. Spiritual guides, sword as steady as steel, gift my sight home. And the bells ringing grew louder and louder as the path before us began to form again. The dark energies around us began to fade, and I began to lose my strength. I felt Boaz pick me up in his arms, and as I wrapped my hands around him, he whispered to me, You are eternally mine, Mai Thao. Return home together and live as one. I smiled and placed my head on his shoulder. I promise. I woke from my dream to the sound of shaman bells ringing in the room, and I saw the shaman woman finishing her ritual. My mother-in-law was burning joss papers beside me, and as I sat up to go, something pulled me back. I turned to find Boaz's wide-open eyes gazing at me, with a love so deep that it made my heart sink with tears. I burst out crying, and I threw my arms around him. Did that really happen? I'm sorry, I cried. No, he whispered. I'm sorry. And then he pushed me back gently and said, You are mine, Mai Thao. I laughed and wiped my eyes. We're not in our room, boy. It's quite public here with everyone watching. He lowered his eyes to my lips and said, Then let them see that you belong only to me. He lowered his head and captured my lips as the breath he gave me filled me with life, an eternal life of love. The baby's cry filled my ears with glee as Boaz's face broke into a grin. He reached out to steady me as I lay in the bed, exhausted, and my heart hammering in my chest. Did I just deliver a daughter? He watched as my mother-in-law cut the cord and wrapped her into a thick blanket, handing her to my husband. His eyes filled with tears as he brought her to me, already cooing her to steal her first breath of life's cry, and I reached out my hands to him. Let me see her, I whispered. She's got your smile, he said, and she's got my eyes. Bua placed her into my arms, and I held her, bringing her close to my heart. Tears streamed down my cheeks as Bua reached over to kiss my forehead. Congratulations, Mommy. You did it, Bua said. I reached up and touched his face. Congratulations, Daddy. She's now yours. The loud and strong cry made the two of us laugh as we celebrated the birth of our first child together, a child that saved the two of us from the demise of our union. That night, as I lay in bed, our daughter, Lutzi, sleeping between us, as hours went late into the night, I drifted off to sleep and returned to the same river that started everything. As the demon emerged from the waters, showing his massive, strong body cloaked in a rich textile outfit, I smiled as he gave me a seductive look.
You must be very happy to see me,
he said.
You come bearing a smile.
Do you know why I am smiling? I asked.
Humor me.
You were warned to stay away from me, demon, yet you slithered back into my dream. You will now have nowhere to run. And with a shout of my voice, I cried out, Bua Chani Vang! The sky opened, and down came Bua on a horse with a sword as he fell to the earth beside me. 2 pieces or 3? How shall I send you off, demon? And as the demon's face broke into horror, the last thing he saw was the shining light of the sword. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Eternally Mine.
Maybe I'm a bird, following the seasons. This is what I've learned. I'm different for a reason. Kept the engine on, never stayed too long. I'm alright, I don't mind being restless. Something in your eye made me stay all night. I can see you are different too. Love me like a stranger, like a melody, flowing wild and free. Love me like a stranger, let it be unique, run away with me. Love me like a, love me like a, love